My name is Rebecca Morgan, and 3 days before my Harvard graduation, my father sent a single text. Can't make it. Work emergency. Your brother needs help moving apartments that weekend anyway. I read it twice, then simply replied, understood. What he didn't know was that I had been selected as valedictorian, and my speech was about to be broadcast live across the nation. By the next morning, my phone exploded with notifications as journalists asked why the seat reserved for my father remained conspicuously empty during the most important moment of my life. Have you ever been invisible to your own parent until your success forced them to see what they'd been missing all along? Tell me where you're watching from and stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. When I close my eyes and think of childhood, what surfaces isn't the warmth of family dinners or the comfort of bedtime stories. It's the echo of my father's voice saying, "Not now, Rebecca. I'm helping your brother with his project." That sentence, in 1,000 variations, became the soundtrack of my growing up. We lived in a modest neighborhood in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where the houses stood shoulder to shoulder like old friends sharing secrets. Ours was the blue one on Maple Street, with the slightly crooked mailbox that Dad never fixed because he was always too busy. Too busy with work, too busy with community obligations, and most of all, too busy with my younger brother Marcus. Marcus was 2 years younger than me, but he might as well have been the sun around which our entire family orbited. He was charismatic, athletic, the kind of kid who made friends within 5 minutes of walking into any room. Dad saw himself in Marcus, or maybe he saw the son he'd always wanted to be. Either way, Marcus could do no wrong, and I could do nothing right enough to earn the same attention. I remember my 13th birthday with painful clarity. Not because it was special, but because it was the day I realized I had become a ghost in my own home. Mom had baked a cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite. But before we could even light the candles, Dad came home with news. Marcus had made the varsity basketball team as a freshman, an almost unheard-of achievement at Lincoln High School. Within minutes, the kitchen transformed. The cake was pushed aside, still unlit, as Dad pulled out his phone to call relatives. "My son made varsity," he announced, his voice swelling with pride I'd never heard directed at me. Mom tried to salvage the moment, bringing out the candles, but Dad was already planning a celebratory dinner at Marcus's favorite steakhouse. "We can do Rebecca's cake after we get back," he said, not even looking at me. We never did. By the time we returned home, I had already gone to bed, and the cake sat in the refrigerator with 13 unlit candles beside it. I found them the next morning, the wax slightly bent from being shoved into a drawer. That's when I started keeping a journal, a small black notebook, where I wrote down every forgotten moment, every time I came second, every time my father's eyes glazed over when I spoke about my achievements. School became my sanctuary. While Marcus dominated the sports fields and Dad attended every single one of his games, I buried myself in books and science. I loved the predictability of equations, the way experiments followed logical patterns, the truth that in chemistry, you couldn't have favorites. Elements reacted the same way, regardless of who mixed them. Mrs. Patterson, my 8th grade science teacher, was the first adult who really saw me. After I won the county science fair with a project on water purification using household materials, she pulled me aside. "Rebecca," she said, her eyes serious behind thick glasses, "you have a gift. Don't let anyone make you feel like it's less valuable because it's quiet." I wanted to tell her it wasn't that my gift was quiet. It was that my father was deaf to anything that didn't involve Marcus. But I just nodded and thanked her, adding her words to the small collection of encouragements I hoarded like treasures. At home, the dynamic was clear. Marcus was the golden child, the one whose trophies lined the mantle, whose games were circled in red on the family calendar, whose college fund Dad constantly added to, because athletic scholarships aren't guaranteed. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the one who helped Mom with groceries, who fixed the Wi-Fi when it went down, who tutored Marcus in math when he was struggling, even though Dad never asked me to. He just assumed I would. There was one incident that crystallized everything. I was 15, and I'd been selected to represent Indiana at the National Junior Science Symposium in Washington, D.C. It was a huge honor, only 30 students from across the country. I needed a parent to accompany me, And the trip fell on the same weekend as one of Marcus's basketball tournaments. Not even a championship. Just a regular tournament 3 hours away. I asked Dad at dinner, my voice careful, already bracing for disappointment. The symposium coordinator said I need a parent to come with me. It's in D.C., just for 3 days. Dad looked up from his plate, fork halfway to his mouth. When is it? April 15th through 17th. His face changed immediately. That's Marcus's tournament weekend. Can't your mother go? Mom worked as a nurse with shifts she couldn't easily change. I'm scheduled for double shifts that weekend, she said apologetically. We need the overtime. I looked at Dad, hoping somehow that he might see how much this mattered. It's a national competition, Dad. They chose me out of thousands of applicants. He sighed, setting down his fork. Rebecca, Marcus's team is counting on family support. You understand, right? You can do science stuff anytime. This tournament is important. The words hit me like a physical blow. You can do science stuff anytime. As if representing my state at a national level was just stuff. As if his presence at yet another basketball game mattered more than witnessing my moment in the spotlight. Marcus, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. Dad, maybe you could... Marcus needs me there. Dad interrupted, his tone final. Rebecca's smart enough to handle herself. That's just who she is. Mrs. Patterson ended up going with me. She paid for her own flight and hotel, wouldn't let me thank her, just said, someone should be there to see you shine. In Washington, when they called my name for second place in the environmental science category, I stood on that stage looking out at an audience of strangers and one science teacher who'd shown up. The seat that should have held my father remained empty, and I felt that emptiness like a hole in my chest. When I came home with my medal and certificate, Dad was watching game footage with Marcus. How'd it go? He asked, eyes still on the screen. Second place nationally, I said quietly. That's great, honey, he replied absently. Then to Marcus, see that play? That's exactly what Coach was talking about. I went to my room and added the medal to a drawer full of certificates and awards he'd never asked to see. That night, I wrote in my journal, I could cure cancer, and he'd still be more interested in Marcus's free throw percentage. High school continued the pattern. While Dad attended every single one of Marcus's games, wearing his team colors and organizing parent cheering sections, he missed my robotics competition finals, my National Honor Society induction, and my interview for the Presidential Scholars Program. There was always a reason: Marcus's game, a work obligation, a commitment he'd made weeks ago. The only person who never missed anything was Grandma Ruth, my mom's mother. She was a retired English teacher who lived in a small cottage on the other side of town, surrounded by books and herb gardens. After every event Dad missed, I'd find a card from her in the mail with a handwritten note. I heard about your achievement. Your light shines brightest when you're being yourself. Never dim it for anyone. When I was 17, something shifted in me. I stopped expecting Dad to show up. I stopped mentioning my achievements at dinner. I stopped looking toward the door during award ceremonies, hoping he might surprise me. The disappointment had calcified into something harder, a kind of protective numbness that felt like armor. I poured everything into my academics. If I couldn't get my father's attention through achievement, I could at least build a future that didn't require his approval. I stayed late at school working on independent research, volunteered at the community center teaching coding to younger kids, and spent weekends at the public library consuming college prep materials. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, called me into his office during my senior year. Rebecca, your transcript is exceptional. Have you thought about where you want to apply? I had. I'd thought about it constantly, but I'd also thought about the reality of my situation. Marcus was heading to a state school on a partial athletic scholarship, and even with that, Dad was stressed about money. I knew better than to ask for help with Ivy League application fees. Mr. Chen seemed to read my mind. I can help you get fee waivers, and with your grades and achievements, you'd be competitive for full-ride scholarships. He leaned forward. Rebecca, students like you, first-generation college-bound, exceptional academics despite limited support, that's exactly who schools like Harvard are looking for. Harvard. The word felt impossible, like something from a different universe. People from Fort Wayne didn't go to Harvard, but Mr. Chen pushed a packet across his desk. Just apply. What's the worst that can happen? So I did. I filled out applications in secret, working on essays late at night after everyone else was asleep. I wrote about being the daughter who learned to celebrate alone, about finding purpose in helping others because no one was helping me, about understanding that validation comes from within because it so rarely came from home. The Common App essay prompt asked about a challenge I'd overcome. I wrote about the empty chairs at award ceremonies, about learning that absence could be a teacher as powerful as presence, about how invisibility had taught me to see others who were overlooked. I didn't name my father, but I knew he was on every page. When the acceptance letter came, I found it in our mailbox on a cold February afternoon. My hands shook as I opened the crimson envelope, snowflakes melting on the paper. Dear Rebecca Morgan, it is with great pleasure that I inform you of your acceptance to Harvard College, class of 2024. I read it 3 times before the reality sank in. Full scholarship, room and board covered, a stipend for books and expenses. I had done it. Against every odd, despite every empty seat, I had earned my way into one of the most prestigious universities in the world. I walked into the house, clutching the letter against my chest. Dad and Marcus were watching basketball highlights in the living room. Mom was cooking dinner, the smell of her pot roast filling the house. I got in, I said, my voice shaking. I got into Harvard. The room went quiet. Dad looked up, confused. Harvard? You applied to Harvard? Full scholarship, I added, the words tumbling out. They're covering everything. Mom dropped her wooden spoon, rushing over to hug me, tears already streaming down her face. Oh, sweetheart, that's incredible. Dad stood up slowly, the acceptance letter in his hands now. He read it, his expression unreadable. Then he said the words that would echo in my memory for years. Harvard's pretty far from home. Are you sure you want to go that far away? Marcus could use your help tutoring him through his general ed classes next year. The air left my lungs. Even this, even Harvard, came second to Marcus's needs. Robert, Mom said sharply, a rare edge in her voice. Our daughter just got into Harvard. I know, he said quickly. I just mean it's a big change, and expensive even with scholarships. There are hidden costs. I'll work, I said quietly. I'll figure it out. He nodded, setting the letter down on the coffee table like it was any other mail. Well, congratulations. That's quite an achievement. Then he turned back to the TV. Marcus, watch this play here. See how he sets up the pick? That night, I called Grandma Ruth. I got into Harvard, I told her, my voice cracking. I knew you would, she said warmly. When do you leave? August. Good. Don't look back, Rebecca. Some people won't see your worth until you're too far away to need their approval anymore. Go build your own life. The months before college were surreal. While other accepted students posted on social media, celebrating with families, having parties, I quietly packed my belongings. Dad never asked about Harvard, never asked to see the campus online, never offered to help me shop for dorm supplies. He was too focused on helping Marcus prepare for college, even though Marcus wasn't leaving for another year. The day I left for Cambridge, Mom drove me to the airport, crying the entire way. Dad had a work meeting he couldn't reschedule. Marcus was at basketball camp. I hugged Mom at the departure gate, promised to call every week, and walked through security alone. On the plane, I pulled out my journal and wrote, Today, I stop waiting for him to see me. Today, I go somewhere that will. Harvard was a revelation and a challenge in equal measure. The campus was breathtaking, all red brick and ivy-covered walls, history seeping from every stone. My roommate, Sophia Chen, was a bubbly pre-med student from Seattle who decorated our dorm room with string lights and posters from her favorite bands within the first hour. Where are you from? She asked, hanging a poster of the Seattle skyline. Indiana, small town called Fort Wayne. She grinned. Then you definitely earned your spot here. Bet you fought hard for it. I smiled non-committally, not ready to share just how hard that fight had been. The academic rigor was intense, but exhilarating. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued intellectual curiosity as much as I did. Professors who remembered my name, who engaged with my questions, who saw potential in me and actively cultivated it. I worked part-time at the Widener Library to cover expenses my scholarship didn't. Late nights shelving books in the vast, quiet halls became meditative. I'd walk back to my dorm past midnight, the Charles River reflecting the city lights, feeling more at home than I ever had in Fort Wayne. But the loneliness was real. During family weekends, campus would fill with parents touring with their students, taking them to dinner, sitting in on lectures. I'd watch from my dorm window, seeing fathers proudly wearing Harvard parent gear, mothers tearing up as they watched their children thrive. My phone would occasionally buzz with texts from home, usually from Mom, asking how I was, sending pictures of the house, telling me she missed me. Rarely from Dad. And when he did text, it was always brief. How's school? Or, don't forget to call your brother on his birthday. Marcus and I had grown apart, not from animosity, but from sheer distance. He was living the college life Dad had always envisioned for him, playing basketball for a Division II school, being the star he'd always been. I was thousands of miles away, building a life Dad had never bothered to ask about. During my sophomore year, I joined a research lab studying environmental policy and climate justice. My professor, Dr. Sarah Whitman, became a mentor who saw something in me I was only beginning to see in myself. "You have a unique perspective, Rebecca," she said after reading one of my research papers. "You understand systems of neglect because you've lived them. That's going to make you an incredible advocate." I didn't tell her that my understanding of neglect came from a father who had systematically chosen my brother over me for 2 decades. I just thanked her and worked harder. By junior year, I had co-authored 2 papers on environmental inequality in rural communities, founded a student organization focused on STEM outreach to underprivileged schools, and maintained a near-perfect GPA. When award ceremonies came, I didn't look for my father in the audience anymore. The reserved family seat stayed empty, and I'd trained myself not to feel the sting. Grandma Ruth was the only one who called regularly, who asked about my research, who wanted to hear every detail of my life at Harvard. "Your grandfather would have been so proud," she'd say. "He always said you had a fire in you that couldn't be put out." "Does Dad ever ask about me?" I asked once, unable to help myself. She paused. "Oh, honey, your father loves you in his own way. He's not good at showing it. And he's so wrapped up in Marcus." "I know," I interrupted. "I just wondered if he ever noticed I was gone." "He notices," she said softly. "But some people don't know how to reach across the distance they've created. That doesn't mean the distance isn't there." During the spring of my junior year, Dr. Whitman approached me with an opportunity. "Rebecca, how would you feel about being the lead researcher on a project studying water quality in underserved communities? It would be intensive, full summer commitment, but it could lead to publication in a major journal." "I'd love to," I said immediately. The project consumed me. I spent the summer traveling to small towns across New England, testing water supplies, interviewing residents, documenting failures in infrastructure. It was challenging, heartbreaking work, but it felt important, like I was finally using my invisible years to make visible what others overlooked. When the paper was accepted for publication in a prestigious environmental science journal, Dr. Whitman nominated me for the Undergraduate Research Award. I won, and the ceremony was held in a beautiful auditorium on campus, live-streamed for families who couldn't attend. I sent the information to my parents 3 weeks in advance. Mom called immediately, excited, asking about flights and hotels. Then, 2 days before the ceremony, Dad called. "Rebecca, about this award thing." My stomach tightened. "Yes?" "Marcus has a really important game that weekend, conference semifinals. I promised him I'd be there, and your mother needs to work. Could we maybe watch the live stream instead?" The disappointment was familiar, almost comfortable in its predictability. "Sure, Dad. No problem." "Great. Congratulations, by the way. Your mother said it's a big deal." I hung up and sat on my bed, staring at the wall. Sophia found me there an hour later. "You okay?" "My dad's not coming to the ceremony." She sat beside me, her hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry. That sucks. It's fine, I said automatically. I'm used to it. Being used to it doesn't make it hurt less. She was right, but I didn't have the energy to acknowledge it. Instead, I focused on the ceremony, on the speech I'd have to give, on anything except the empty seat that would bear my father's name. Grandma Ruth came, of course. She flew in despite her arthritis, despite the expense, despite being 78 years old. I wouldn't miss it for the world, she said when I picked her up at the airport. At the ceremony, when they called my name and I walked to the stage to accept the award, I looked out at the audience. Grandma Ruth sat in the front row, beaming, her phone held up to record every second. Beside her, 2 seats remained empty, name tags reading Robert Morgan and Patricia Morgan, fluttering slightly in the air conditioning. I gave my speech about environmental justice, about how the most overlooked communities often face the greatest challenges, about how visibility is a form of power. And I thought about my father, watching from a basketball game in Indiana, if he was watching at all. That night, Mom called, crying. I saw the live stream. Sweetheart, you were amazing. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. It's okay, Mom. Grandma came. I know. She sent me pictures. A pause. Your father, he feels terrible. He's just so committed to supporting Marcus. I know, I said. And I did. I'd known my entire life that Marcus came first. Hearing it again didn't change anything. Senior year arrived like a freight train. Suddenly, I was applying for prestigious fellowships, interviewing for jobs, and navigating the complex world of post-graduation life. I applied for and won a fellowship to work on climate policy in Washington, D.C., starting after graduation. In February, I received an email that would change everything. The senior class committee had selected me to deliver the student commencement speech as valedictorian. Out of over 1,500 graduating seniors, they'd chosen me. I stared at the email for a long time, my heart pounding. This was it. The biggest moment of my academic career, a speech that would be broadcast live, attended by thousands. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, exactly who wouldn't be there. I called Grandma Ruth first. They chose me to speak at graduation. She actually screamed, a joyful sound I'd never heard from her before. Rebecca, that's incredible. My granddaughter, the Harvard valedictorian. Will you come? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Then I called my parents. Mom answered, and when I told her, she started crying immediately. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. Is Dad there? Robert, she called. Rebecca has news. I heard shuffling, then Dad's voice. What's up, Becca? I'm speaking at graduation. I was chosen as valedictorian. Silence. Then, wow, that's really something. Congratulations. So you'll come, right? Both of you? Another pause, longer this time. My stomach dropped before he even spoke. When is it exactly? May 19th. It's been on the calendar for months. More silence. Let me check something. I heard papers shuffling, then a heavy sigh. Rebecca, that's the same weekend as Marcus's graduation from his program. We already booked tickets to California for his thing. Of course. Of course Marcus had something. There was always something. Dad, this is Harvard. I'm the valedictorian. I know, and we're very proud. But Marcus's graduation is important too, and we already committed. Maybe we can watch yours online. They usually stream these things, right? The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. 22 years of coming second, and here we were again. Sure, I said, my voice hollow. Watch it online. Don't be like that, Rebecca. You know how it is. Marcus needs our support, and you've always been so independent. You'll be fine without us there. There it was again. That word, independent. The word that gave him permission to abandon me under the guise of a compliment. I have to go, I said. I have a meeting. Okay. Love you, kiddo. And seriously, congratulations. Valedictorian at Harvard. That's no small thing. I hung up without saying I love you back. Sophia found me on the floor of our common room, staring at nothing. What happened? He's not coming. My dad's not coming to graduation. She slid down beside me. Why? Marcus has something the same weekend. Can't your dad come to yours and your mom go to Marcus's? I laughed bitterly. That would require him to prioritize me for once in his life. We sat in silence for a while. Then Sophia said, "You should still give the best speech you've ever written. Not for him, for you, and for everyone else who's ever been second choice." She was right. I spent the next 3 months crafting that speech, pouring every invisible moment, every empty chair, every second-place feeling into words. I wrote about absence as a teacher, about learning to see yourself when no one else does, about the power of showing up, especially when no one showed up for you. 3 days before graduation, I sent my parents the final details: ceremony time, live stream link, seat reservation confirmation. My father's response came 2 days later, a text message at 11 p.m. "Can't make it. Work emergency came up. Your brother needs help moving apartments that weekend anyway. Sorry. We'll watch online." I read it twice. Work emergency. Marcus needs help. The same excuses, different words. I typed back one word. Understood. Then I did something I'd never done before. I made it public. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't need to. I simply told my story to a journalist from the Harvard Crimson who'd asked to interview the valedictorian. When she asked about my family attending, I told her the truth. My father won't be there. He's never been there. But I've learned that the most important person who needs to show up for your success is you. The article ran the day before graduation. By that evening, it had been picked up by local news, then regional news, then national outlets. Harvard valedictorian to give speech without father in attendance. A story of overcoming absence. Read one headline. She made it to Harvard alone and she'll graduate alone too. Read another. My phone exploded. Notifications from news outlets, interview requests, messages from strangers sharing their own stories of absent parents. But nothing from my father. I turned off my phone and focused on what mattered. The speech I would give tomorrow. The moment I had earned, regardless of who was there to witness it. Graduation morning dawned clear and perfect. The kind of late May day that feels like a gift. The sky was impossibly blue, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass across Harvard Yard. I dressed slowly in my crimson gown, pinning on the gold cords that marked my academic achievements, adjusting my cap until the tassel hung just right. Sophia helped me with my makeup, chattering nervously about her own family arriving, then stopping abruptly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it. "I'm happy your family's here." Grandma Ruth arrived at my dorm an hour before the ceremony, wearing a pale lavender dress and carrying a small box wrapped in silver paper. "For you," she said, pressing it into my hands. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small compass pendant. "So you always know which direction to go," she explained, "even when others try to redirect your path." I hugged her tight, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and old books. "Thank you for always being here. Nowhere else I'd rather be." We walked to Tercentenary Theater together, her arm linked through mine. The lawn was already filling with students in crimson gowns, families in their finest clothes, photographers capturing every moment. I checked in at the staging area, where other speakers were gathering, and received my seat assignment on stage. Before taking my place, I walked to the family seating section. My reserved seats were in the third row, clearly marked with name cards. Ruth Morgan, grandmother, and beside it, conspicuously empty, Robert Morgan, father. I placed a single white rose on my father's seat, not as a memorial, but as a marker, a quiet acknowledgement of absence. A campus photographer noticed and snapped a photo. That image, my hand placing the rose on the empty chair, would later become the most shared photograph of the day. As I took my place on stage, I could see the massive crowd gathering. Thousands of people, families embracing, cameras flashing, the buzz of excitement building like electricity in the air. The Harvard University Band played ceremonial music, and television crews from multiple networks set up their cameras. I looked out at the audience and found Grandma Ruth in her seat, her phone already recording, her face glowing with pride. Beside her, the empty chair with its single white rose. The sight didn't hurt anymore. It was simply the truth, made visible. The ceremony began with the traditional processional, faculty in their academic regalia leading us in. I sat on stage, heart pounding, as the university president gave her address, as honorary degree recipients spoke, as the minutes ticked closer to my moment. When my name was called, when I stood and walked to the podium, a strange calm settled over me. The microphone hummed softly as I adjusted it. The sea of crimson gowns stretched before me. Thousands of faces turned up, waiting. I took a breath and began. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Morgan, and I want to tell you about an empty chair. A ripple went through the crowd, subtle but noticeable. Throughout my life, there has been a chair. At my science fairs, my award ceremonies, my proud moments. A chair with a name tag, a reservation, a space held for someone who never came. That chair taught me something important. Absence is also a form of presence. I paused, letting the words settle. I grew up believing that success meant making someone proud. I thought if I just achieved enough, worked hard enough, excelled enough, I would finally be worth showing up for. But what I learned is this: you cannot earn love through achievement. And sometimes, the people who should celebrate you most will be the ones who miss it entirely. From the corner of my eye, I could see camera operators zooming in, journalists scribbling notes. But here's the truth that empty chair taught me. When no one shows up for you, you learn to show up for yourself. And once you master that, you start showing up for others. I told them about the students I'd mentored, the communities I'd researched, the people I'd met who'd been overlooked and underestimated. I spoke about how invisibility had taught me to see others, how absence had taught me presence, how being second choice had taught me to never make anyone else feel that way. To every student here who has an empty chair in their story, I said, my voice growing stronger, let me tell you something. That chair doesn't define you. It doesn't limit you. It teaches you. It teaches you resilience, self-reliance, and the profound power of choosing to become the person who shows up, even when no one showed up for you. The applause started softly, then built like a wave. Today, as I stand here as your valedictorian, I want to acknowledge that empty chair one final time, because it's part of my story. It's part of what made me strong enough to stand here. And it's a reminder that we don't need everyone's approval to succeed. We just need our own determination. I looked directly at the camera I knew was broadcasting live. To my father, who isn't here, I forgive you, not because you've asked for it, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your absence into my future. I am successful not because you weren't there, but despite it. And I hope someday you realize what you missed. The theater erupted. Standing ovation, tears, the roar of thousands of voices. I stood at the podium, hands shaking, watching Grandma Ruth stand with tears streaming down her face, watching strangers in the audience wipe their eyes. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't see from that stage, was the firestorm beginning online. The speech was live-streamed across multiple platforms. Within minutes, clips were circulating on social media. Harvard valedictorian calls out, absent father in emotional speech, trended on Twitter. The video of me placing the rose on the empty chair went viral, shared hundreds of thousands of times with captions like, empty chair revolution, and this is what resilience looks like. News outlets picked it up immediately. Viral graduation speech highlights impact of parental absence. Harvard students' powerful message about showing up resonates worldwide. And my phone, which I'd turned off before the ceremony, was accumulating notifications like a storm gathering strength. After the ceremony ended, after the caps were thrown, and the congratulations exchanged, after the photos with Grandma Ruth and Sophia and my professors, I finally turned on my phone. 347 notifications. The first was a text from my mother, sent during the speech. "Oh my God, Rebecca, what have you done?" Then Dad, "We need to talk. Now." "Marcus. Sis." My phone is blowing up. News reporters are calling me. What's happening? But those were buried under hundreds of other messages. Interview requests from news outlets. Messages from support groups for children of narcissistic parents. Emails from students sharing their own empty chair stories. A message from a TED Talk organizer. Another from a book publisher. The article from the Harvard Crimson had exploded. The journalist's follow-up piece, "The Empty Chair, A Father's Absence and a Daughter's Triumph," had been shared over 1 million times. Photos of me placing the rose were everywhere, with the empty seat clearly visible, my father's name tag prominent in every shot. Someone had found my father's Facebook page. His last post, from the day before my graduation, was a photo of him helping Marcus move, captioned, "Proud dad helping my son start his new chapter." The comments were brutal. "But not proud enough to attend your daughter's Harvard graduation? Your daughter is the valedictorian, and you chose moving boxes over her speech? She placed a rose on your seat. That image broke my heart. Father of the Year award goes to literally anyone else." I sat on a bench in Harvard Yard, Grandma Ruth beside me, scrolling through the chaos I'd inadvertently created. My private pain had become public, and the world was reacting with the fury I'd never allowed myself to feel. "Are you okay?" Grandma asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "You told the truth," she said. "The truth has consequences, but that doesn't make it wrong to tell it." My phone rang. Dad. I stared at it, watching his name flash on the screen, then sent it to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I sent it to voicemail again. A text. "Rebecca, answer your phone. This is out of control. Reporters are calling your mother's work. Marcus is getting harassed online. You need to fix this." I typed back, "I didn't create this situation. I just stopped hiding it." The response came instantly. "We're your family. How could you humiliate us like this? Everything I've done has been for you kids." I stared at those words for a long moment. Then I typed, "You weren't there, Dad. You're never there. The world is just noticing what I've lived with for 22 years. My phone rang again. This time I answered. "Rebecca." His voice was tight, angry. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I gave a speech about my experience. You made us look like monsters. Your mother is crying. Marcus is being attacked by strangers on the internet, all because you couldn't keep family business private." "Family business?" I repeated. "You mean the fact that you chose to help Marcus move instead of attending my Harvard graduation? It's not that simple, and you know it. Marcus needed help, and you've always been independent." "Stop," I interrupted, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "Stop calling it independence when it's neglect. Stop making excuses. You made a choice, Dad. You've been making the same choice my entire life." I finally just named it publicly. "So this is revenge? You're punishing me?" "No," I said, and I meant it. "This is freedom. I spent 22 years trying to earn your attention. I'm done." I gave that speech for every kid who's ever felt invisible to their own parent. If it makes you uncomfortable, good. Maybe you'll finally understand how it felt. "Rebecca, I need to go," I said. "Congratulations on helping Marcus move. I hope the boxes weren't too heavy." I hung up. Grandma Ruth squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "I think so," I said. "For the first time, I think I actually am." Over the next few days, the story continued to explode. Major news networks picked it up. Morning shows wanted interviews. My inbox overflowed with messages from people sharing their own stories of parental neglect, of being the forgotten child, of sibling favoritism. A therapist wrote an article about golden child syndrome and scapegoating, using my situation as a case study. Support groups formed online for empty chair survivors. Someone started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students whose parents didn't support their education. The attention was overwhelming, but what struck me most were the personal messages. Thousands of them, from people around the world who'd lived versions of my story. My father never came to a single one of my performances, but he never missed my brother's football games. I graduated medical school, and my parents didn't come because it was my sister's birthday weekend. I thought I was the only one who felt invisible in my own family. Thank you for making me feel seen. I realized my empty chair wasn't just mine. It belonged to countless others who'd learned to celebrate alone, to succeed without support, to build themselves in the shadows cast by preferred siblings. A week after graduation, I agreed to do one interview with a national news program. The reporter was kind, but direct. Your father has been contacted by multiple outlets. He's declined to comment. How does that make you feel? Consistent, I said honestly. He's been declining to show up my whole life. This is just another form of absence. Do you regret the speech? It's caused quite a bit of controversy. I don't regret telling the truth. I regret that the truth is necessary. I regret that so many people have connected with this story because they've lived it too. Have you spoken to your father since graduation? No. He called several times, mostly concerned about how this looks for him. But he hasn't once said he was sorry for not being there. And that tells me everything I need to know. The interview aired on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, it had 5 million views. That afternoon, my father published a statement on Facebook. I love my daughter very much. I've always supported both my children equally. Rebecca has always been independent and capable, and I trusted her to handle things on her own. I'm sorry she felt neglected, but that was never my intention. I hope we can resolve this privately as a family. The comments were immediate and scathing. Notice how he doesn't say he was wrong, just that he's sorry she felt neglected. Independent and capable is code for, I ignored her, and she survived anyway. Still no acknowledgement that he missed her Harvard graduation. Still making excuses. My mother called, her voice exhausted. Rebecca, please, can we talk about this? Your father is devastated. Is he devastated that he hurt me, or devastated that people know he hurt me? She didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, both, I think. Mom, I love you, but I can't protect Dad from the consequences of his own choices. He had 22 years to show up. He chose not to. I'm not the villain for pointing that out. I know, she whispered. I know you're not. I wish it didn't have to be this way. So do I said. But this way is the truth, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Marcus called the next day. Unlike our parents, he sounded different. Reflective. Becca, I'm sorry. I waited. I never realized how bad it was. I mean, I knew Dad favored me, but I didn't. I didn't see how much it hurt you, how much you were doing on your own. It's not your fault, Marcus. Isn't it, though? I let it happen. I let them make everything about me, and I never questioned it. I just enjoyed the attention. You were a kid, too, I said. We were both just kids navigating our parents' dysfunction. Still, I'm sorry. And for what it's worth, that speech was incredible. You deserved to have a full audience. You deserved to have Dad there, cheering louder than anyone. It was the first time anyone in my family had said that. The acknowledgement broke something open in me. Thank you, I managed. I'm going to do better, he said. I'm going to show up for you. Even if Dad won't, I will. It wasn't everything. It didn't erase 22 years, but it was a start. 2 weeks later, as the media frenzy finally began to die down, I received a letter in the mail. Real mail, handwritten on actual paper. The return address was my father's office. I almost didn't open it. But Grandma Ruth, who was visiting, encouraged me. Sometimes people can say in writing what they can't say out loud. The letter was 2 pages, my father's careful handwriting filling both sides. Dear Rebecca, I don't know how to start this, so I'll just start with the truth. I was wrong. Not just about missing your graduation, but about all of it. All the missed ceremonies. All the times I chose Marcus over you. All the ways I made you feel invisible. You were right when you said I've been making excuses. I have. I told myself you were independent, that you didn't need me the way Marcus did. But the truth is, I was scared. Marcus is easy for me to understand. Sports, competition, confidence. I know that world. But you? You were always so smart, so driven, so far beyond anything I understood. I didn't know how to connect with you. So I told myself you didn't need me to try. That was cowardly. You deserved a father who showed up, who learned your language instead of expecting you to speak his. You deserved to be celebrated, not overlooked. I watched your speech. I watched it 12 times. And each time, I saw more clearly what I'd done. I saw the empty chair not as a symbol, but as a reality. I wasn't there. I've never been there, not really. I can't undo the past. I can't go back and attend all those events I missed. But I can acknowledge what I did, and I can try to do better going forward if you'll let me. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you, even when I failed to show it. You are remarkable, not because you're independent, but because you refuse to let my absence define you. You built yourself despite me, not because of me. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. Love, Dad. I read it twice, tears blurring the words. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix everything, but it was honest. More honest than he'd ever been with me. Grandma Ruth watched me read, her expression knowing. Well, it's a start, I said. Yes, she agreed. The question is, what do you want to do with it? I thought about that for a long time. I thought about forgiveness and boundaries, about second chances and self-protection. I thought about the girl I'd been, waiting for approval that never came, and the woman I'd become, who'd learned to approve of herself. Finally, I wrote back, Dad, thank you for your letter. It means more than you know to hear you acknowledge what happened. I need you to understand something. I'm not angry anymore. Anger requires energy I'd rather spend on other things. But I'm also not ready to pretend everything is fine. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it has to be different. It has to be real. That means showing up, not just when it's convenient, but when it matters. It means asking about my life, not just updating me on Marcus. It means being present, actually present, not physically present, but emotionally absent. I'm starting a job in DC in the fall. I'll be working on environmental policy. If you're interested, I'd like to tell you about it. Not because I need your approval, but because I want you to know who I am, who I've become. The empty chair will always be part of my story, but it doesn't have to be part of our future, if you're willing to finally sit down. Love, Rebecca. I sent it before I could overthink it. Whether he responded, whether he changed, whether he truly showed up, that was up to him. I'd done my part. I'd told the truth, set my boundaries, and opened a door. What he did with it was his choice. The fellowship in DC started in August. I moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill, walking distance from my office. Sophia came to visit during my first week, bringing wine and Chinese takeout, christening my new place with stories and laughter. You did it, she said, raising her glass. You're free. I am, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. And I was. Free from expectation, from waiting, from the constant hope that maybe this time would be different. I'd built a life on my own terms, surrounded by people who chose to show up, who valued me not for my achievements but for who I was. The viral speech became a book deal. The Empty Chair, Finding Yourself When No One's Watching, would publish the following spring. I dedicated it to Grandma Ruth and to everyone who'd ever learned to celebrate alone. My father and I exchanged letters throughout that first year. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something new. Not the relationship I'd wanted as a child, but an honest one, built on truth rather than pretense. He came to DC for a weekend in October, just him, without Marcus or Mom. We walked around the monuments, had dinner at a small Italian place near my apartment, talked about things we'd never discussed before. I'm learning, he said over dessert, that being a good father isn't about being comfortable. It's about showing up even when you don't know what to say. Yeah, I said. It is. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when he defaulted to talking about Marcus, when I had to remind him I needed equal attention. But he was trying, genuinely trying, and that meant something. On my birthday, he sent flowers to my office with a card. Happy birthday, Rebecca. I'm sorry I missed so many of these. I won't miss any more. Love, Dad. They were white roses, like the one I'd placed on his empty chair. A symbol transformed, from absence to presence, from pain to possibility. Grandma Ruth called that evening. "Did you get flowers?" "I did. White roses." "Good," she said, satisfaction in her voice. "He's learning." "He is," I agreed. "But even if he weren't, I'd be okay." "I know you would. That's what makes you extraordinary. You learn to bloom in the absence of applause." A year after the speech, Harvard invited me back to speak at a symposium on first-generation college students. I stood in the same theater, looked at the same stage where I'd given the speech that changed everything. This time, when I looked at the audience, I saw my father sitting in the third row. He'd flown in without telling me, wanting to surprise me, wanting to show up. When our eyes met, he smiled and gave a small wave. Not the proud father showing off his accomplished daughter, but a man humbled by what he'd almost lost, choosing to be present. After the speech, he waited while I talked to students, while I took photos, while I signed books. He didn't rush me, didn't make it about him. He just waited, patient and present. "Good speech," he said when we finally connected. "Thanks for being here," I replied. "Nowhere else I'd rather be." Those words, the ones I'd waited my whole life to hear, finally spoken when I no longer needed them to survive, when I'd learned to thrive without them. We walked through Harvard Yard together, past the spot where the ceremony had been held, past the bench where I'd sat reading my father's messages, devastated and alone. "Do you forgive me?" he asked quietly. I thought about it, really thought about it. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "Some days yes, some days no. But I'm committed to trying. That's more than I deserve. Maybe. But it's what I'm choosing to give." We stopped at the John Harvard statue, where tourists were taking photos, rubbing the toe for good luck. My father pulled out his phone. "Can we take a picture?" he asked. "I know I missed the graduation photos, but maybe—" "Yeah," I said, surprised by the emotion in my throat. "We can take a picture." A kind stranger took the photo. My father's arm around my shoulders, my graduation building in the background, both of us smiling, genuinely smiling. He posted it on Facebook later with a simple caption, "With my daughter, the Harvard valedictorian. Better late than never. Proud doesn't begin to cover it." The comments were mostly kind. Some people who'd followed the original story wrote things like, "Good for you," and "Glad you're showing up now." But the comment that mattered most came from Marcus. "Finally, Dad. Finally. I didn't need my father's redemption to be complete. I'd already built my peace without it. But watching him try, watching him learn, watching him slowly transform from the absent father to a present one, that was a gift I hadn't expected. The empty chair would always be part of my story. It taught me resilience, self-reliance, and the power of showing up for myself. It taught me to see others who are overlooked, to celebrate those who succeed in silence. But it didn't have to define my future. I could honor the girl who survived alone while building a life surrounded by people who chose to stay, to show up, to be present. Years later, when people asked about the viral speech, about the empty chair, about the father who wasn't there, I'd tell them the truth. The empty chair was the best, worst thing that ever happened to me. It broke my heart, but it also built my strength. And when my father finally chose to fill it, I was already complete. His presence became a bonus, not a necessity. Because that's what I learned, sitting in all those audiences, staring at all those empty seats. We don't need anyone's validation to be worthy. We don't need everyone to show up to be successful. We just need to show up for ourselves, consistently, faithfully, with the same dedication we once hoped others would show us. And when we master that, when we become the person who shows up for ourselves, we transform. Not in spite of the absence, but because of what we learned from it. The empty chair isn't an ending. It's a beginning. The beginning of learning that we are enough, all by ourselves. And that everyone who chooses to join us after that is a blessing, not a requirement. My name is Rebecca Morgan. I'm a Harvard graduate, an environmental policy advocate, an author, and a daughter who learned to celebrate alone until she didn't have to anymore. And if you're reading this from your own empty chair, please know, you are seen. You are valued. You are enough. Show up for yourself the way you wish others would show up for you. Build your own table, create your own celebration, become your own best supporter. The chair might be empty, but your future doesn't have to be. Show up for yourself. I promise. It changes everything.